Evelyn always believed that silence was safer than truth. It protected her, kept her hidden, and allowed life to move forward without confrontation. But she never realized that silence could also destroy everything she loved. She was 32, a teacher in a small-town high school where everyone knew everyone. Her life was quiet, almost invisible. Wake up, go to school, come home, feed the cat, and fall asleep watching documentaries. It wasn't that she disliked her life. She simply accepted it as the kind she deserved. But that year, a new history teacher joined the school, Daniel Moore. He was the kind of man who brought light into dull rooms. Warm, articulate, and with a smile that made even the most distracted students listen. Everyone liked him. Everyone, including Evelyn. At first, they were just colleagues, sharing coffee in the teacher's lounge, exchanging jokes about the chaos of school life. But soon, something unspoken began to grow between them. It wasn't dramatic or rushed. It was the kind of quiet connection that built itself through small glances and unfinished conversations. One rainy afternoon, Daniel offered her a ride home. The sound of rain on the windshield filled the silence between them, soft and tense. When he stopped the car in front of her apartment, neither of them moved. She turned to thank him, and he just looked at her, his eyes holding a question she didn't dare answer. That night, Evelyn couldn't sleep. She kept replaying that moment, the silence, the nearness, the warmth that scared her more than anything. Because Daniel wasn't single, that he was married. She had seen his wedding ring 100 times, but chose not to think about it. She told herself it didn't matter because nothing had happened. They were just friends. But deep down, she knew that silence itself was becoming an act of betrayal. Weeks passed. Their friendship deepened. They had lunch together, graded papers in the same classroom, and laughed at private jokes that no one else understood. Rumors began to spread. Students whispered. Colleagues exchanged knowing looks. Evelyn ignored it all. One Friday, as the sun dipped behind the town, Daniel appeared at her door. He looked exhausted, eyes red from arguing. "We had a fight," he said. "She thinks there's something going on between us." Evelyn's heart pounded. "And is there?" she whispered. He looked at her, and for a moment, he didn't answer. Then he said softly, "There doesn't have to be words for something to exist." She should have ended it then. But instead, she let him in. The days that followed felt unreal, like she was living someone else's life. Daniel stayed over more often. They cooked together, watched movies, and fell asleep on the couch. He told her he planned to leave his wife, but he needed time. Evelyn believed him because she wanted to. But every morning, he left before dawn. And every time she asked when things would change, he said, "Soon." One afternoon, as Evelyn walked into the teacher's lounge, she felt the room go quiet. Her colleague, Mrs. Porter, gave her a sharp look and said, "I hope you know what you're doing, dear. This town remembers everything." Evelyn forced a smile, pretending she didn't understand. But shame was already spreading inside her like fire. Then, it all fell apart. Daniel stopped showing up to work. Whispers turned into headlines. Local teacher under investigation. His wife, it turned out, had filed a complaint, not just for infidelity, but for alleged misconduct at school. Evelyn wasn't named, but everyone knew. When the principal called her in, his expression was heavy. "Evelyn, you've always been a good teacher. I don't want to believe the rumors, but we can't ignore them. I think it's best if you take some time off." She nodded, unable to speak. That night, she waited for Daniel, but he didn't come. She called him, no answer. Texted, nothing. 2 days later, she found out he had moved out of town. Just like that, the silence she once loved now felt like punishment. Her phone stopped ringing. Friends avoided her. Even students looked at her differently. She became the ghost of her own life. Invisible again, but for all the wrong reasons. Months later, she received a letter in the mail. It was from Daniel's wife, Claire. Evelyn hesitated before opening it. The handwriting was calm, almost too calm. "Evelyn, I'm not writing to hurt you. I just want you to understand what your silence cost. He didn't leave me. I asked him to go because I couldn't bear to watch him destroy himself. You were his escape, not his salvation. I hope one day you see that silence is not kindness. It's fear, and fear ruins more than truth ever will." Evelyn read the letter over and over until the words blurred. She realized Claire wasn't angry. She was free. But Evelyn wasn't. Not yet. She began writing that night. Her thoughts, regrets, everything she never said. Pages filled with confessions no one would read. It became her ritual, and somewhere in those pages, she found a small piece of peace. Not forgiveness, but understanding. Because the cruelest truth of all was this: the moment you stay silent when you should speak, you choose your own chains, and Evelyn had worn hers for far too long. Winter came early that year. The first snow fell quietly, like the world was trying to cover everything. The mistakes, the whispers, the scars. Evelyn stood by her window, watching the flakes drift through the gray air, and wondered if it was possible to start over when your name had already become a cautionary tale. She hadn't spoken to anyone from the school since she left. Her apartment had become a kind of shelter, small, silent, and safe. Days blurred into each other. Coffee, reading, writing, sleeping. She had stopped checking her phone. The outside world no longer felt real. Then, one morning, there was a knock on the door. Evelyn froze. No one ever visited. When she finally opened it, she saw a girl, maybe 17, standing in the hallway, her backpack soaked from the snow. "Miss Hart?" The girl asked, voice trembling. "You don't know me. I'm Lila. I was in Mr. Moore's class last year." Evelyn's heart skipped. "I'm sorry, what are you doing here?" Lila bit her lip. I didn't know who else to talk to. You were always kind to us. And I heard things, but I don't believe everything people say." The girl's honesty hit Evelyn harder than any insult. She stepped aside. "Come in." Lila sat down, shivering slightly. "He used to help me with history after school," she said. "He told me I could do anything if I believed in myself. But after he left, everything got worse. My grades, my head. I don't know. I just thought maybe you'd understand." Evelyn didn't know what to say. She wanted to tell her that Daniel wasn't who she thought he was, that heroes sometimes wore masks. But instead, she said softly, "You're not alone, Lila. And you're not broken. You just need time." Lila nodded, eyes glistening. "Can I come again? Just to talk?" And that was how it began. Small, hesitant steps back into life. Lila came every week. They talked about school, books, and dreams. Evelyn started tutoring her quietly, off the record. The girl reminded her of who she used to be: curious, hopeful, unafraid of the future. Through Lila, Evelyn found purpose again. But peace never stays forever. One evening, as she walked home from the library, Evelyn saw someone standing across the street, a man in a dark coat, holding an umbrella. For a moment, her breath caught. Daniel, he hadn't changed much, maybe thinner, more tired. His eyes met hers across the snowy street. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. Then, slowly, he crossed. "Evelyn," he said, voice barely audible above the wind. She wanted to run, to disappear, but her feet wouldn't move. "Why are you here?" "I had to see you. I know I have no right, but I couldn't leave it like that." She laughed bitterly. "Leave it like what? You vanished, Daniel. No calls, no messages. Just silence." "I thought it would make things easier," he said quietly. "For you. For me." Her voice cracked. "You destroyed my life. You left me to deal with the fallout while you started over somewhere else. And now you think showing up fixes anything." Daniel looked down. "I didn't start over. Claire left me. I lost my job. I've been trying to make sense of it, and I can't. I keep thinking about you, about what we had." "What we had?" Evelyn shook her head. "We had lies, Daniel. Beautiful ones, maybe, but still lies." He reached for her hand, but she stepped back. "I'm not that woman anymore," she said. "The one who stayed quiet because she thought silence was love." Daniel's eyes softened. "You've changed." "I had to." He hesitated, then nodded. "I'm sorry, Evelyn. For everything. You didn't deserve it." She wanted to say something cruel, something final, but the words didn't come. Instead, she just whispered, "Go." And he did. That night, Evelyn couldn't sleep. She sat by the window again, watching snow fall over the street where Daniel had stood, and realized something strange. She didn't feel angry anymore. Just empty. But in that emptiness, there was space. Space for something new. Weeks passed. Evelyn started volunteering at a local youth center, helping students who struggled with writing and communication. The director, a middle-aged man named Henry Carter, was kind, patient, and thoughtful. He had the calmness of someone who had lived through his own storms. They worked side by side, quietly at first. Then they started talking about literature, teaching, and life. Henry never asked about her past, but one evening, As they closed the center, he said, "You have a way with the kids. You make them believe in themselves again." Evelyn smiled faintly. "Maybe because I know what it feels like to lose belief." He looked at her for a long moment. "We've all lost something, Evelyn. The difference is whether we stay lost." That night, for the first time in a long time, she dreamed of light instead of rain. Spring came, and with it, change. Lila graduated with honors, thanks to Evelyn's help. She hugged her tightly after the ceremony. "I couldn't have done this without you," the girl whispered. Evelyn smiled, tears in her eyes. "You did this yourself. You just needed someone to remind you could." As Lila walked away, Evelyn felt something inside her shift, a quiet pride. Soft, but real, but just when life began to heal. The past found her again. One afternoon, a letter arrived at the youth center. It was from the Department of Education. They were reviewing her eligibility to return to teaching. Henry found her sitting on the bench outside, the unopened envelope in her hands. "Are you going to open it?" he asked. "I don't know," she said. "What if it's another door closing?" He smiled. "Or maybe it's one finally opening." She opened it. Her hands trembled as she read. "Dear Ms. Hart, after review, we are pleased to inform you that your teaching license has been reinstated. You may reapply for positions beginning this fall." She stared at the words, not believing them. After all the months of shame and silence, someone was giving her a second chance. Henry put a hand on her shoulder. "You earned it," he said softly. "Don't waste it hiding." That night, Evelyn went home and opened the box where she kept all her letters, including the one from Claire. She read it again, but this time, the words didn't sting. Instead, they reminded her of how far she'd come. She took out her old journal, the one filled with pages of regret, and tore out the last sheet. On it, she wrote, "Silence once kept me safe. Now it keeps me small. I choose to speak, even if my voice trembles." Then she closed the notebook for good. Summer arrived. Evelyn accepted a position at a small private school in the city, a fresh start, a new beginning. On her first day, she stood in front of her class, hands slightly shaking, and smiled at the curious faces before her. "My name is Ms. Hart," she began, her voice steady. "And I believe every story deserves to be told, even the ones we're afraid of." The students listened. Some smiled. And for the first time in years, she felt like herself again, not the shadow of a scandal. Not the woman who loved the wrong man, but a teacher who had found her voice. That evening, she walked home through the golden light of sunset. The city was alive around her. Laughter, movement, music. She thought about Daniel, about Claire, about all the things left unsaid, and she whispered into the breeze, "Thank you," for the silence and for the sound that followed. Autumn returned, painting the city in gold and rust. Evelyn loved this season most. The air crisp and honest, the world between warmth and cold, much like her own heart. She had been teaching at the new school for 6 months. It was small, nothing fancy, but it was hers, her classroom, her students, her second chance. The walls were covered with artwork, quotes, and essays about resilience. On the board, she had written one of her favorite lines: "We cannot rewrite the past, but we can choose what story it tells about us." Her students loved her. She wasn't just a teacher. She was someone who listened, who understood silence without judgment. They could feel it, that quiet strength of someone who had fallen and found her way back. But one day, something unexpected happened. During the lunch break, the school secretary called her to the office. "There's someone here to see you," she said. Evelyn frowned. "Who?" The secretary hesitated. "A young woman. She says her name is Claire Moore." The name struck like a distant echo. Daniel's wife, or rather, his former wife. Evelyn's pulse quickened, but she nodded. "Send her in." A few minutes later, Claire walked in. She looked older, her hair shorter, her eyes tired but clear. She smiled faintly. "You probably didn't expect to see me again." Evelyn shook her head. "No, I didn't. Please sit." For a moment, neither spoke. The air between them was thick with everything they didn't say. The betrayal, the guilt, the shared man who had left scars on both their lives. Finally, Claire spoke. "I heard you were teaching again. I wanted to see for myself if it was true." "It is," Evelyn said softly. "I'm trying to make things right." Claire nodded, studying her. "You look different, stronger." "I had to be." Claire exhaled. "Daniel passed away 3 months ago." The words hit like cold water. Evelyn blinked. "What?" Car accident, Claire said quietly. Late at night. He'd been drinking. They said he was on his way to see someone. Maybe you, maybe not. I'll never know. Evelyn sat still, unable to breathe. She didn't love him anymore, but some part of her, the part that once waited for his messages, that believed his lies, still hurt. I'm sorry, she whispered. Claire looked down. I don't know if I am. He ruined both our lives in his own way. But I needed to talk to you. To close the chapter. Evelyn nodded slowly. Me too. Claire's eyes softened. You know, I hated you. For a long time. But the truth is, I think I hated myself more for believing in him. For ignoring the signs. I understand, Evelyn said quietly. I did the same. For the first time, Claire smiled. Maybe we both deserved better. They talked for an hour, not as rivals, but as survivors. When Claire finally stood to leave, she said, he took so much from us. Don't let him take what's left, your peace. After she left, Evelyn sat alone for a long while. She thought about Daniel, about all the chaos he brought, and for the first time, she forgave him, not because he deserved it, but because she did. That night, she went for a walk through the park. The air was cool, the trees whispering in amber light. She passed couples holding hands, children chasing leaves, and she smiled. Life was moving on, and so was she. The next morning, one of her students, a shy boy named Jonah, handed her a note before class. It's something I wrote, he said nervously. For the essay contest. Evelyn opened it after class. The title read, The Teacher Who Saved Me. He had written about her, how she made him believe in himself, how she never judged him when he stuttered, how her quiet words made him feel safe, the end. He wrote, she told us that silence can protect you, but it can also trap you. I think she knows what that means. And that's why she's brave, because she still speaks. Evelyn couldn't stop the tears. They were soft, grateful tears, the kind that come when pain finally turns into peace. A few weeks later, the school invited her to give a speech at the local education conference. She hesitated at first. Public speaking had always terrified her, but Henry, her friend from the youth center, encouraged her. Your story could help others, he said. You don't have to tell everything, just the truth that matters. And so she did that on the day of the event. She stood on stage, lights bright in her eyes, hands trembling around the microphone. The audience was full of teachers, parents, and students. She took a deep breath. When I was younger, she began, I thought silence was strength. I believed that if I stayed quiet, I could keep peace. That truth only caused pain. But silence isn't peace. It's fear in disguise. And the longer we feed it, the louder it grows. The hall was silent. I lost my voice once, she continued. But someone reminded me that even broken voices can heal others. So I started speaking again, not loudly, not perfectly, but honestly. Because sometimes, that's all it takes to change a life. She paused, scanning the faces before her. If you ever feel that your mistakes define you, remember, they don't. What defines you is what you do after. Whether you choose to stay silent or to speak your truth. When she finished, the applause rose slowly, then thundered. Evelyn smiled, not the smile of victory, but of release. She had faced the ghost of her past and turned it into light. After the conference, people came up to her, teachers who had faced scandals, women who had loved the wrong person, students who had been afraid to speak up. They thanked her. They told her she wasn't alone. That night, she returned home and sat by the same window where she once watched the snow fall. The city lights shimmered below, alive and forgiving. She took out her journal again, the one she thought she had closed for good, and wrote, The price of silence was losing myself. The reward of truth was finding who I was meant to be. She smiled, closed the book, and this time, it felt final, not an ending, but a quiet, complete beginning. Months later, Evelyn's story was published in a local magazine under the title, The Price of Silence, A Teacher's Redemption. It became widely read, shared, and discussed. Not for its scandal, but for its honesty. Letters poured in, from strangers who had found courage through her words. One said, Your story gave me the strength to leave my toxic marriage. Another wrote, I was a student once, like Jonah. Thank you for being the teacher we all needed. Evelyn realized then that her pain had not been wasted. It had become something else, a lesson, a bridge, a light point. One evening, she met Henry for coffee. He smiled as he handed her an envelope. "The school board wants you to speak at the national conference next year," he said. "They read your article." Evelyn laughed softly. "Life has a strange sense of humor. Or maybe it has balance," Henry said. "You lost your voice. Now you're teaching others to find theirs." She looked out the window, at the setting sun reflecting in the cafe glass. Maybe that's what all of this was for. He nodded. Maybe. As the evening deepened, they talked about small things: books, students, plans for the future. But in the back of Evelyn's mind, she felt a deep peace. The kind that doesn't shout, doesn't fade, just as, later that night, she walked home through the quiet streets. A soft breeze moved through the trees, carrying whispers of laughter and life. She stopped by the old bookstore she used to visit with Daniel, now run by someone new. Inside, she found a book on the front display titled The Courage to Begin Again. She smiled, bought it, and left. Outside, she whispered to herself, "Yes, again." She didn't look back.